Like every time Bradley starts his show, he gets like an arena level introduction. And the way that Scott says Alabama as somebody from Chicago with a pretty heavy accent, I suppose, from time to time, like, dude, this guy says Alabama and it just makes me love it. So I'm going to introduce you as Bradley Flowers, somebody I know and respect inside the insurance industry, and somebody that I think is going to talk about a lot of cool things, not just social media, not just podcasting, not just insurance. We're going to cover a lot of topics today. But Bradley, welcome to Quoted, first and foremost.
Thanks, Pat. I really appreciate it.
On an Instagram level, Bradley, you're somebody that I think motivates me more than anything else, trains me. And, I think that's where I want to start today is to talk a little bit about the Instagram aspect of your business. Let's talk a little bit about your background, how you got into, especially the Instagram side of things. And, we'll dive into some other questions as well.
I was actually never a social media guy, and I always, anytime I'm giving a presentation to people about social media, especially if that crowd is much older than me, I always preface with, I hate the aspect of everybody knows everything about me personally of social media. And I actually, in 2013, so this is crazy, 2013, which was not that long ago, I worked in an office where with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people, and one person had Facebook. And it wasn't me. And so I never was like a social media guy. I've always considered myself a marketer first and an insurance agent second. And I think one of the number one rules or number one principles that I apply to my own business with marketing is I figure out what I either figure out what my competition is doing and try to do it better, or I figure out what they're doing and I try to do the opposite or do something else. And in 2013 insurance in Saraland, Alabama, everybody was doing billboards, direct mail, and radio. And believe it or not, nobody was doing networking events. I'd go to a networking event. I'd be the only insurance agent there, maybe 1 or 2 other people at the most. And nobody was doing social media. And I sort of realized like, hey, not only are they not doing social media, but they have a lot of compliance and I really don't. So I sort of dove into that. I read the 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. I started following Grant Cardone. I watched listened to one of Grant Cardone's podcasts, and he started talking about jab, 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 right hook by Gary Vaynerchuk. And so the first marketing book I ever read was a Gary Vaynerchuk book. That's sort of what I started basing my marketing on were the principles in that book. And so I started marketing on social media in October of 2014 was when I went all in. I'm like, okay, this is all I'm doing. Did it for a solid year. And when I say did it for a solid year, meaning I was posting between all the platforms about 10 times a day on every platform. There was no scheduling. I'm really not a tech savvy guy. I didn't know about all these programs like Hootsuite and things like that. And I was literally posting in the moment, organically, native content to multiple platforms a day for a year before I got one piece of business. And that's what I tell people when they're starting from scratch. Look, you got to stick to it. I'm now one platform I'm focusing on now that I've neglected is YouTube. And I'm having to remind myself, look, we're going to have to do this a year before we get any, at least direct results, but it's a long-term play, So that's sort of how I got started. I really wasn't on Instagram until I think 2015, I think I was on there late 2015. And it took me a little while to realize that there was an opportunity there. I sort of hit my stride about a year ago with Instagram. And I think the advantage for really any business is, Instagram, you can't schedule posts. There's some platforms that do it, but it's kind of glitchy. It's not great. So it's got to be posted in the moment, as well as it's a visual platform. I can't walk out of my office and go take a picture of insurance. I can't do it, right? So what's your product? You're your product. So it sort of played into my hands of the personal branding. But I think because of those two reasons, the lazy marketers, the people who don't want to put the time in to learn how to do it right because it's so different from every other platform, they don't do it. Therefore, there's an opportunity there for someone in the insurance industry or any industry to get what I call an undeserved land grab, so to speak.
I like that. And I'm glad you brought up Gary Vee, because you're being super humble about it. I consider it a big deal that you're going to be a speaker at the 2021 conference. So first and foremost, congratulations on that piece of it.
I appreciate that. And Danny Kimball is actually announced today. She's going to be a speaker. So I know you've had her on here.
Just one of those people that, just like you, it seems like they're genuinely trying to show off their industry in the right way. And they're, just like you, she's deservedly going to that conference. I imagine because of that, you get some attention, you get some questions maybe that just come from the outfield. And at a minimum, you see a pickup in the interest in what you are doing. So as far as like a best practices or something when you get an inbound follow or an inbound message from another business, what are some of the things that make you want to reach back out, make you want to potentially do business with that person?
First off, with the Agent 2021, I'm unapologetically a huge fan of Gary Vee and almost cried in the video I made where I announced I was speaking. Like, I'm not one of these guys that's like, I'm too cool, I'm going to be like, yeah, I was expecting. Like, I'm like, it's the coolest crap that's ever happened to me, like, hands down. So I'm good with being shameless as far as that goes. I've had 11 people. I had, in the first 3 days since I announced it, I had 11 people ask me for tickets. I had 3 companies reach out to me wanting to collaborate, 1 CEO, and an influencer marketing pitch within just a few days of that. So it was almost like, oh my gosh, which was really cool because I'm nobody. And so, but as far as, what gets through my filter, I think is what you're asking, what gets through my, first of all, when I pull my phone up and I look at the account, we're talking about Instagram specifically, right? When I look at the account, I was talking to a friend of mine, Ricky Caruth, the other day. Ricky's a huge name in the real estate industry. He's got 20-something thousand followers on Instagram. He lives about an hour from me. And I said, Ricky, when you look at an account and it just looks spammy? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, you can't explain it verbally, but if I look at the account and it just looks spammy, or they've got all these like freaking emojis in their description, that's the first thing I look at is, okay, is this someone that I would be okay with saying is my friend from just the customer looking at this account type of aspect, And I like people who, and I've had a lot of that recently. I hate would love to collab. This is, hit you with the right hook immediately. Like, let's just reach out. Hey, love what you're doing. Be the genuineness, I guess is what I'm trying to say. If someone is genuine, they're usually going to get a reply back. Very rarely do I not reply to someone. I was like, I would love to know your strategy, your process for connecting with the travel agent and setting that deal up. Or people ask, I would love to know your process for how you get your guests. Do you reach out to their agents? Like, no, I freaking pick my phone up. I go to Instagram or Facebook. I go to DM and I say, hey, you want to do this? Or, hey, would love to talk to you about, you see what I mean? Like, and I mean it genuinely. I'm not trying to right hook. I'm like, hey, this is who we are. This is what we do. This is what we like to do. If that's, you see what I mean?
People need to take a look at what you just said there at the end. I picked up the phone. I said, hey, we need to talk. There's a lot of jabs that go on Instagram. There's a lot of just little subtle reaching out, but it's picking up the phone, it's sending that message and saying, let's get on the phone and talk.
It's kind of, hey, we need to talk to see if they were interested in talking to me. It wasn't, hey, I want to talk to you. I want to talk about, I want to help you to, whatever, and like I get these people now that they're like, boy, your Instagram page is underperforming. We need to help you increase your likes. And I'm like, first of all, I would rather, and I've actually neglected in saying this. I don't talk about follower count a lot. I would rather have the right 200 followers than the wrong 200,000 followers.
The podcast itself, I have a very direct question there. but what has the podcast done for your career?
Connections. I really didn't know, Scott, it was Scott's idea to start the podcast. The biggest reason I think people don't do a podcast is they don't know how. And luckily we had Johnny Gwynn with Deep Fried Studios has a plug and play podcast studio right here in my hometown. And so luckily we had that. But I really didn't know in the beginning. I remember Scott and I having a conversation, early conversation about the podcast and what we were going to do. This is before we ever recorded an episode. And the conversation was, is this going to be directed towards the public about insurance? And we would have 3 followers, Scott's mom, my mom, and my wife. Or is this going to be directed towards other agents? And ultimately we chose the other agent, to help the industry for 2 reasons. One, legacy and playing the long game. Yeah, doing a podcast for the consumer would be a really short-term play. Like, okay, we might get some business off of it. Whereas building, it sort of inadvertently builds your personal brand and might even legitimize us to the customers a little bit. Like, man, this guy is talking to people about insurance. He's the guy I need to do my insurance with. But for a long time, we started a year ago this month, I think, and our last month. And for a long time, we didn't know. And we got invited to go up to Paradiso's office, Chris Paradiso. If you're not following him, you need to follow him, in March of 2018. And we did 2 days of intense, like boot camp style, training with Chris. And at the end, we recorded a podcast, and we were talking about the podcast afterwards. And in the midst of this, in 2 days, Chris has put me in touch with all these people, right? CEO of this company, COO of this company, owner of this agency, this guy, put me in touch with all these people. And he sat across the table from me and looked me in the eye and said, 10 years from now, maybe even 5 years from now, maybe even a year from now, you're going to look at me and you're going to say, this podcast was the best thing you've ever done, because of the connections and the people that from this. It's gonna increase business because people are gonna want to come back to us. It's allowed me to get some technology that I use at maybe a cheaper price, if you want to look at it that way, because we work out some kind of deal, that sort of thing. But the very, very best thing that's happened from it has been the Agent 2021 thing, or the coolest thing that's happened from it, because if it wasn't for the podcast, that would not have happened. Agent 2021. So I reached out to the lady who is over the conference. I'm not going to say her name because I don't want people to blow her up, but through tactfulness, through research, I figured out who the actual person was that ran the conference, right? I had absolutely no end game, no goal, no angle, no strategy. And I said, I want to interview you on my podcast. We'll drop it a month before the conference airs, and it can be a 30-minute commercial for Agent 2021. I have an audience of nothing but insurance agents. And that's all I said. I wanted to help them. I'm offering my podcast that I make no money from, that costs me money, so you can make money. And she sends back and I didn't ask for Gary Vee to be on. She emails back, I would love to do that. And actually, would you want to be a speaker?
In the modern era, you're a teacher to, an adult professional like me in a lot of ways. I go to iTunes, and that's where I do my classes. I do yoga, listening to it sometimes, sometimes in the morning, but it's a teaching, it's a teaching environment. Earlier, I asked you, with the side gig economy, with the share economy, side hustles, you're headed to Gary Vee's event. You're probably going to run into at least a couple people with the side hustle. What are some tips that you have for the side hustler? So
I have projects that I work on, side projects. One now we just announced day before yesterday. I'm working with an organization here in Mobile to organize a conference. business/leadership conference. That's a side gig of mine. It has nothing to do with insurance. I have no insurance objective where I'm going to want people to come see me. I wanted to do something cool for the city. Nobody's hosted a business conference here in ever, I think. That's a side project I'm working on. The podcast is it's a side project. I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with my agency, And I think, I thought about this question. I think time blocking is important to those side hustles, those side gigs, those projects. It's all about time blocking, So like the summit that we're doing, the conference, I time block about an hour or two every day where I work on that. But I think that is the key in 2019, 2020 is to schedule your time out like that. I spoke with a gentleman the other day who owns 3 businesses, and he said, I give 15 hours to each business a week. He said, they all make me equal amounts of money, so I give 15 hours to each. And so I think that's the key as far as that goes. So, but yeah, I think time blocking that's really the only thing I could think of that makes that successful. You have to be careful when you don't time block. So I started an organization here in Mobile called Mobile Young Entrepreneurs. So in 2015, 2016, Mobile YE, we call it Mobile YE. Mobile YE affected my insurance business because I didn't time block. I was doing more Mobile YE during a day than I was doing insurance. And I caught myself. I'm like, well, I'm doing way too, Mobile YE's never made me $1. I've never made $1 from it. It's cost me money. I've never made $1 from the podcast. The podcast has cost me short-term money. So because of those two, I sort of discover, okay, I need to time block this, and I can do some of this in a day, but it needs to be from 3 to 4 or whatever. So I think that is key.
That's a great place to, kind of stop, because the time that you've given me is so valuable, and I appreciate it. And you've really covered a lot of different topics, but the big takeaway that I want people to have, and the thing that, I look at from a professional side, is that you can buy insurance from a lot of people, but how many people can you go talk to that run a podcast, that do a big networking event, that get asked by Gary Vee to come and speak? And by the way, they'll take care of, any kind of insurance question you have. You're a pretty dynamic person, not just in the insurance industry, but in the marketing industry now. And I think you're continuing to grow. And as somebody that, again, has learned from you over and over, I can't tell you, again, how thankful I am that you came on my show today.
It's humbling that you asked. I was fired up when you asked. So I love stuff like this. This is my favorite thing I'll do today.
I promised people that there'd be a lot of gold, and you spit a ton of it for us like usual. So thank you again for coming on Quoted. I really appreciate your time today.
Hey, Pat, I really appreciate it. It meant the world to me that you asked. If I can ever do anything for you or any of the people watching this, please reach out to me.